hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to The Hybrid. I'm Erik Gunderson, and as always, joined by my co-host, Shawn Collins. So today we have a really interesting conversation lined up, one that honestly feels a little bit out of my comfort zone, and in talking with Shawn, certainly out of his as well. But
That's rude.
that's the whole point of having these types of conversations, getting to see all the different angles and impacts in the cannabis space. So our guest today, we're welcoming back for the second time, Mackenzie Slade. As a reminder, Mackenzie, the CEO of Cannabis Public Policy Consulting. In this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into three major topics. So first is how researchers are starting to use AI to improve cannabis regulatory science and what that actually looks like, where it could be useful or maybe a little overhyped. Then we'll get into RCTs, random controlled trials. What are they, why they matter, and how they're showing up in the cannabis space, both in clinical research and in some less obvious non-clinical ways too. And then finally, we'll look ahead to the question of what's going to happen with hemp demand as we get closer to the deadline in November 2026. What are the policy signs? What should regulators and policymakers be keeping an eye out for? And what should really the industry just be paying attention to now? So, Shawn, good to see you again. Welcome back. That was a brief intro. I wanted to make sure. Yeah, get right to the good stuff. Gets right to the conversation. How are you though?
I'm well, thank you. I'm looking forward to talking with Mackenzie again. This is exciting, and it's AI, it's cannabis, it's 2026. Let's get into it, right?
Yeah,
it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we made it 16 episodes in before we actually started talking about AI. So here we are. So Mackenzie, welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I'll say our first repeat guest. I think you were on our second or third episode. Now you're on our 16th. So you have that. You can put it on a little little trophy or something.
I'll put it on the shirt.
There you go. So just for our listeners, obviously Shawn and I know you pretty well. Give us a little bit of background about what you're doing in the research space, in the cannabis space, and what you're doing with Cannabis Public Policy Consulting.
Yeah, sure. So, oh, sorry, I just screamed at you.
No, you didn't.
I'm Mackenzie Slade. I'm the CEO of Cannabis Public Policy Consulting. My background is implementation science, which is an evaluation science, pretty tailored toward public policy in the public health space. And Cannabis Public Policy Consulting, we are a government-only research firm that works with the regulatory agencies across the country and hopefully internationally at some point related to policy evaluation, market dynamics, anything that can be proven empirically, we sort of work on within the cannabis space.
Beautiful. So I think probably well suited to talk about, I mean, the suggestions were yours. Let's talk about AI and its nexus with cannabis. Let's talk about random controlled trials and where they're showing up in the cannabis research and everything that you're doing. So as I said, certainly getting outside of our comfort zone as far as what we can talk about, but I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. I apologize up front, at least for me, probably asking some dumb questions along the way. So when we're talking about AI, I think AI is a lot of things to a lot of different people. Some people, it's a chatbot when you go to visit a website. It's for some people, it's ChatGPT. So what we're going to be talking about here, I think, is kind of expanding our mind of what it really is. But I think the most important part here is to figure out where the nexus is with cannabis, right? Like, how are researchers using AI, incorporating AI, leveraging AI to improve cannabis regulatory science? And really, for a lot of our listeners who may the first time actually delving into this conversation, really boil it down to like, what does that mean in practice? What should regulators know? What should industry folks know that's happening? So again, how are you seeing, Mackenzie, AI being inserted into what is happening in the cannabis space, research wise or other?
Yeah. In a few different instances, I mean, like, of course, you've probably seen in your inbox, there's like quite a bit of new businesses that are like trying to sell the type of AI um, products that like source all the the bill information related to legislative sessions. Like they try to condense it all, what's usually really, really challenging to gather by hand into one condensed library. That's obviously a way to increase efficiency within cannabis regulatory science. But from like a very scientific perspective, there's an example of what's being done at the Center for Technology and Behavioral Health out of Dartmouth. That's, I think, really important. And actually, friend of the firm, Jacob Brodowski. So sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Jacob. Out of the
It was
Center
that
for
much of a friend,
Technology.
huh?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna say
close friend.
we're super close.
Super
Our
close.
next guest, Jacob.
Great friend.
Yeah, bring on
So
Jake.
he trained with Mike, Dr. Sophus, our
Oh
inaugural
yeah.
director of research. And they both work under who is known as like the premier substance use disorder researcher, Alan Budney out of Dartmouth. And so they have been working on a research grant out of from NIDA related to trying to understand if there are AI tools that could be used to increase the efficiency and overall like salience of AI within the purpose of cannabis regulatory science. And so one of the things that they've been working on in particular has been training LLMs, large language models, chatbots, much like their ChatGPT, and actually they use ChatGPT for the study, to rate cannabis packages and images. So, trying to get a better understanding of a variety of different sort of sentiments that these images might evoke. And obviously, we talked about this last time from a cannabis regulatory perspective. One of the main things within advertising is, youth protections, trying to not be attractive to youth, trying not to sort of glorify or glamorize use in any way that might evoke, emotions similar to urgency or anything of like, related to dependence, right? Something that would increase use. And so that's obviously a very fine line to walk in general. And so they were putting together a chatbot like structure to mimic a study that was done with humans. Back in 2021, there was a study where they showed basically 4 groups of participants based on their primary method of administration. So, be it by bongs, by vapes, concentrates, smoking a joint. I think those were actually the 4 subgroups. They showed them images of cannabis related advertising, some within all of them within the route of administration. So if their primary method of consumption was by using a bong, they were shown images with a bong. Um, and so that paraphernalia was sort of consistent throughout. And they were to rate them on 3 factors. The first one is valence. Second one was arousal. And I think the third one was urge. Yes. And so they rated them on a scale from 1 to 9 to say, okay, what does this image sort of evoke for you? What comes up if you had to rate them from 1 to 9 on these topics or these 3 sentiments? And so they said, okay, what if we took that same study and instead of using human participants, went ahead and trained large language models with the same sort of prompt that these humans had, and then went ahead and asked it the same question to give it to the same rating. And so that to me was like a really, really incredible study. And I want to sort of talk more about it, but I want to give you all a minute to digest and
Yeah.
ask more.
Well, I mean, I have a couple questions. We'll start with just kind of level set because I think I understand what you're saying, but you said at the top you're skeptical of AI, and this seems like a skeptical. There's some skepticism there, but let's find. At the end of the day, what is the objective of this study? What are we trying to do? Are we just trying to create this large language model that is identical to, I guess, focus groups, for lack of a better term, so we can do research with the large language model instead of bringing people in to? Are we looking to set a standard for something? Because the way that I'm thinking about this right now is they're uh, across states, across these programs, uh, regulators have always been asking for, let's have some type of standards. And obviously, when you're talking about advertising, it's like, what's attractive to children? What's neon? you can even get into the minutia of what's human, what's an animal. Like, it's terrible. So are they proposing, like, through this research, we can use a large language model to almost like de facto set a standard around this stuff? Or am I missing the mark here?
No, you're spot on. I think from the scientific question they're asking.
No, we're going with spot on. Shawn, you relax.
Okay.
That is like
know.
the ultimate, like anytime you're doing research, right? Like there's the ultimate end goal of like, okay, what does this actually produce when applied?
Yeah.
But from a scientific perspective, when you're doing any sort of research, you have one primary research question. And for this one specifically, what they're looking at is, can large language models basically reproduce the same emotion, sentiment, and ratings as humans? That is effectively what the question is trying to ask.
Doesn't that mean you just what in the
The
way that
answer's
my
no, right? Like,
no, I would
no.
imagine the answer is yes, because
Absolutely not.
can't you just go back over and over and over again if they're using ChatGPT to rewrite the prompts until you get the exact answers that the first human group got?
Sure, but like, who's to say what the human group is going to say next? Like, they're people with
It's a past
souls
study, though. They
and a
have
conscience.
There are people
and-
who use this, right? They're a specific subgroup. There are people who use this, they're past month consumers who use this method of administration, right? And so the idea here is more of like in that world of dependence and abuse rather than like just a regular everyday person off the street. And so they're avid consumers. They're more of the 20% than the 80% whenever we talk about the market. So really, that's sort of the underpinning of the conversation. And so, but Erik, you're not wrong, right? Like, can't you just constantly change the
Man,
prompt?
these clips
Can't
are
you
gonna kill
constantly
me.
just, I know. Well, you know what's so funny? Because
Erik,
you did
you're
say
not
at the
wrong.
top.
You know what, Shawn, before we had Mackenzie, before we recorded, Shawn goes, I'm going to be an audience in a fly on the wall. And now that you've injected yourself into the conversation, you're getting
Yeah.
stomped on. So go back to just listening.
Every audience has a heckler.
Oh, that's good. But Erik, you're not giving yourself enough credit because, like in the beginning,
Oh my
you were
God,
saying,
stop.
"Oh, here we go." So sorry. I very rarely compliment Erik, so stick with me on this.
Our listeners understand that. Yeah, they can tell.
You said at the beginning you don't know enough about the science and like you're going to be really beginner at this, but you're not wrong. What you said about like, can't you just constantly change the prompt, or knowing how ChatGPT or any of these large language models work, can't you just ask it the same question 100 times and get 100 different answers?
That's what Erik
Well, that's
does.
effectively what they did. They set out a trial to say, we're going to train these chatbots, right? So they took those four subgroups based on their primary method of administration. They gave it a prompt to say that you are a primary consumer of XYZ cannabis under this potency, like whatever the actual prompt was. And you guys will put in the show notes the actual link to the publication so people can see it. But they gave it the prompt
Totally.
that basically made it and framed the human aspect of what the McAtee 2021 study said. And said, okay, this is who you are. This is what you're doing. We're going to show you these images. You're going to rate them on this, this, and this. And you're going to do it from a scale of 1 to 9, 9 meaning this, 1 meaning this. And they did it 100 times. Same prompt, 100 times. And the idea was to see, sure, we might be able to get this, we might be able to train them and get a similar answer based on the prompt one time, but let's see if we can get it on 100 trials. And so that's what they did. And they started a new thread every time so that there was no carryover. And they did that for all four subgroups, 20 images within each of the, each of the prompts. And they really just replicated that original study 100 times per subgroup, and per construct. So per valence, per urge, and per arousal, to sort of map out the findings of consistencies, obviously like standard deviations, as well as how statistically different those findings are, or those ratings were from the human chat, or excuse me, from the humans, from those in the focus group.
And so what were the findings? Did they determine that, yes, you can train these large language models to do this? And then I guess my follow-up question would be like, all right, if that's the objective of the study, let's see if AI tools can do this type of stuff. Like, what are the downstream like, what's the next step?
Great. Excellent questions. So they found that they were rarely equivalent.
We never, Mackenzie, like you should know well enough that this is not normal for Mackenzie and I.
No, we're usually
I need
fighting.
to find
We're
out
usually
you
screaming
find
at each
it.
other.
This is-
But especially knowing that you're not feeling well, Eric, you're like, maybe that's the recipe.
I'm locked in.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah, or
medication
I'm just
talking.
being really
It's
nice
the
'cause I know you don't
medication.
feel well.
It's actually an
Um,
AI bot of Eric. We've
yeah.
Your
So it
intelligence is
basically
10 on a scale of 1 to 10 today.
the big reveal.
Yeah. All right. Sorry.
They basically found that like it was rarely equivalent to the human. So, that's kind of as expected because equivalent meaning like the literal same. But that wasn't really the most interesting finding, right? Because obviously having the same exact ratings wouldn't be necessarily what we're interested in. What we're interested in is like how similar they are or how different they are. And then I was very interested in the consistency of their response. And so they found that the AI bots were actually more consistent in their reporting than the humans, which I think is interesting finding. Um, and you can see it if you want to I don't know if you have screen sharing abilities, but if you want to put up or insert the graph at some point, you can see the differences between them and they're pretty damn similar. Like it's quite impressive between the AI bots and then the actual humans. The overall finding was like, look, this is obviously the first study of its kind. There are going to be some limitations. This was just on OpenAI's Chat GBT 4.0. Somebody with Claude might have a different experience, whatever. But overall, this is like a pretty promising finding to think that this could be a tool that's automated and could be used for things like advertising, packaging, labeling, anything online. It can be really scaled up to be just like, accessing retailers online at a point of interstate commerce, something like that could be huge. And so that was really the overall finding is like, there's genuine promise here that this could be something that could be utilized in a real world setting after many iterations and advancements.
I mean, I think about it in the context of at the end, like the product, the output of that study is like almost like the consciousness of that, like you said, that subgroup or that subset of the consumer. But then, I mean, that scales like that approach, I think, scales to a lot of different regulatory use cases as well, where we think about like who is the reasonable person. Nobody really knows, except if we could train a model that we all almost like as a society agree these inputs sort of develop or become that. What it does is it gives a almost a guaranteed objectivity and doesn't eliminate but reduces bias and says like we put it into the system and this is objectively neon, this is objectively a cartoon, this is objectively, and that way it's not like, oh, this person's out to get me. It's like, is the computer out to get you? Because there was no human psyche involved outside of just sort of the logic we put into it. But I think about the broader, again, like the implications or the long-term use case scenario of if you can prove that that concept exists, then where else can you apply it? And again, I think Eric and I tend to think about the regulatory angle of how can we as regulators be more efficient, but also improve our own systems. And if there's a way to do that, that doesn't also sacrifice human capital too, because how many of our staff members were bogged down in stuff that was like, man, if I could just train a bot to do this.
Well, that's kind of that's the funny thing that I'm thinking about. Who's going to be the first state or the first agency that goes and lobbies the legislature for a regulatory change, and part of their evidence for that change is the fact that they trained an AI bot or like a large language model to do this. Be like, we did X, Y, and Z, but then like Steve, who we named our AI bot, who is the reasonable one, also said we were right. Like that's am I crazy to think where this may be going? And I also agree with you, Shawn. It's not just, actually, I don't know if you named this point. You probably didn't, but in my stroke of brilliance today, like this is not just like advertising and marketing stuff, though. You could apply this to basically anywhere in a set of regulations, train them to kind of think about this stuff, and come up with what the most eloquent solution would be. I'm thinking about on like compliance enforcement, like what's the best way to get voluntary compliance out of this set of regulations, yada, yada, yada. So it's fascinating. But Mackenzie, who is the first state that's actually going to say, hey, we used AI for this?
I mean,
Who's going to do that?
Whatever states currently has like under their purview having to sit there and go through and sort for every single advertising. That's a total waste of time, to be honest. If something like this were to be able to be tested, proven, curated. Like obviously we're still ways away from it, but if NIDA come, or I should say, if Jacob and team come back and they say we did another iteration, we really refined it. We looked at things beyond urge, valence, arousal. We looked at attractiveness, you like things that are like largely outside of the scope of what they looked at currently, and we're able to make this into a tool that any government agency that had the requirement to sit there and sort through all of these materials, that would be a total, if this was evidenced, that would be a total waste of capital.
And they do. And I mean, we've sat with state clients before and had this conversation where I've been an advocate the entire time I've been a regulator to not do it on the front end, but do it on the back end. Be very clear with what your expectations are. I'm not going to pay 6, 7, 8, 9 people to sort through hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of labels, marketing material, advertisements to say yes, 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 yes. Although there are states that do that. And the one that comes to mind is Oregon. I think I've met the gentleman. Am I getting that right, Shawn? Is it Oregon or Washington? I believe it's Oregon. They have a gentleman.
Those are both states. They both have gentlemen too.
Anyway, there was a gentleman that was active in Canada. I wish I could remember his name. That was his main job. He was brought in to lead the team of people that did that, and he did it 24/7. I think he was a lawyer by trade, but and I always thought to myself, that's crazy. You have 9 staff and they're dedicated to this work when all of these agencies are struggling with so many other things. But they could be, like now you're talking about the conversation that's blown up over the last, I don't know, the last 2, 3, 4, 5 months where AI is going to come in and take everybody's jobs. You've just pointed to a tangible example of where that could happen. That's crazy. I hate it. It makes me feel icky.
Oh, you hate
Does it
it?
take their job?
It's gross.
But that's the thing I think of, like I mentioned, like the workforce implications, but I think of is it going to take their job? Probably not. It's going to allow them to do their job. It's going to free them up to do their job. Or it's going to, I think there's still always going to be a necessity to have human oversight, like anything that comes with the consequence of government action needs to 100% have a human accountable for it at the end of the day. Like, I think that's where, and like, that sounds like the industry, like if I'm going to deprive someone of either like a property right in their license, or I'm going to deprive them of their ability to choose their own label so long as it's compliant, and if it comes with any risk or consequence of enforcement action, like there needs to be a human element involved.
Well, yeah, of course, but you're not going to need.
But I'm thinking about like on the front end opportunity, to your point, as far as like not wanting to do it on the front end, what if there was a portal where you could upload your label?
Yeah.
And if the AI chatbot says you're good to go, it's like you have a hall pass now. And like we still reserve the right as the regulator to come in and say on second review on a human evaluation, no. But you should then be able to waive and say, I used your stupid chatbot. I'm
right.
Like, this is my get out of jail free card today.
Oh gosh. Fun times.
Yeah,
AI.
I agree. I don't think it's necessarily taking away jobs. I think it's making jobs and government time more efficient. Like, I don't think that anyone who's a full-time employee of whatever agency is their full-time role is to look at these, these products or these advertisements. Like, that would seem crazy if that was someone's full-time role where they had
Isn't that where you got your start, Erik? Wasn't that your full-time
Yeah, the
role?
mermaid. Talk about the mermaid.
Yeah, that would have been an inch. They should run the mermaid through the study and see what they come up with.
But I was literally just going to say that, because when you're talking about like on the back end of having a human verify it, it's like, you think about the risks of AI and like the risks of something like this, of it not catching it or something like that, which obviously are the same for humans, right? Like we're also imperfect. And we also have bias, and we also have, perception issues. And so one of the things I was thinking about was like, one of Maine's first public health victories was when you went and sort of, when you really fought to get what was that seaweed? It was called seaweed?
Yeah, the mermaid logo.
Mermaid. And it was like, is this a person? I remember it a little bit. Is this a person? Is this a cartoon? Is this a fictitious creature? Like, what is this by definition? And how do we sort of establish this? Obviously, there's legal text that guides that. Yeah. But outside of legal text, is there something more objective that might have been a more reliable source? And like, I'm certain if we put it through their chatbots and changed, or even a random ChatGPT, LLM type of thing, and just said, tell me, don't search the internet for legal language, tell me from a perception basis, and gave it that prompt, what it would result in, I'm certain it would be consistent with what you have to say. But you think about the the risks. And it's like, those risks exist within humans too. You're going to have to fight for it regardless. It might be more objective with something without, you know.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see what actually came of that if we actually did run it through that. It's to their credit, it was a great logo. I thought it was very nicely done. But as soon as we saw it, I was like, this checks like 16 boxes of what's not allowed. And we did have those conversations internally about what would legally stand up if we were to take action, because I was like, it's a human and an animal. And they were like, no, it's not. It's a mythical creature. I'm like, yeah, but it's part human, part animal. But it ended up being attractive to children because
this is why your rollout took so long.
It's
this
incredible.
is the shit
Had
you
nothing to
guys
do with COVID.
apparently did. It's
Listen.
a mermaid. Who cares? Like, the chatbot should also not be lame. Let it just, like, one more prompt. Like, you are not lame. It's a mermaid.
See, Shawn would have let it fly. Shawn just
No, I probably wouldn't have.
hates public health and safety.
I probably wouldn't have. But there's so many things that I think, like, there's so many applications. Like, we struggled a lot with the colloquial reference to cannabis. Like, what is a colloquial reference? And some of it was like, I feel like I'm bringing commissioners and staff through like Urban Dictionary sometimes to be like, this is 1,000% a colloquial reference. Like, I've never heard of it before. Yeah, you're not the target audience either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was, I mean, there's so many different things where it could just make that process. I think, Mackenzie, you kind of touched on it, like, just more efficient. And where I would spend 2 days doing that research, I can say, run this evaluation and then be able to have an informed conversation as a human, right? Like, there might be an angle I don't see, or there might, like, the colloquial reference is a good example. I think the imagery is another one of just like, did you think about it from this angle? Or did you even know this is a popular cartoon? Or it can just fill in some of the gaps that we have, our own blind spots maybe. But again, I think I just come back to, it should be used as a tool and not the solution necessarily. Like, it, by all means, leverage it, but don't replace like, it should inform your process, not replace your process.
Well, but that, I mean, if we're going to talk about this honestly, though, like, if you again bring
if you bring earlier,
okay, sorry. So, but the way that I'm thinking about it is, okay, so you have the team in a state of 10 individuals that this is their full-time job of doing this. If you actually do fully embrace AI in this model because it can do X, Y, and Z, can't you just build that into a system, into a process? Like we were just talking about, you submit it through this, AI does it, spits it out. You don't need 10 more people. You need 1 or 2. That's just part of the larger conversation around AI that rubs me the wrong way. But
if you had those 10 people at your agency, let's say you had an agency of 50 people and you had 10 people doing that, you're not going to tell me you couldn't use 10 more people on physical inspections of facilities. You couldn't use 10 more people dealing with patient, like, call center issues. Like, there's so many things I think if I had 10 more people to deploy, I would have deployed them. And some of it was, this process, while dumb and inefficient, is also a necessary, like, we have to do it. So if I could be more efficient and put those people where the critical mass was, where the bottleneck was. Also, I constantly tried to train and hire for versatility of, there's going to be a season to things too. So if I could take that person and deploy them during the, outdoor grow season, great. And if in the winter they're looking at applications and other materials, wonderful. Anyway, we always need more people. So
more people. All right.
Is that a segue?
I mean, it does seem like a pretty good place to have a segue. Mackenzie, anything else on the AI stuff?
What did we learn from this study? Like, what is the takeaway? If you had to, for our listeners who have been entertained, no doubt, what is, from your perspective as someone who also, I would imagine, scrutinizes studies like this?
Totally.
What is your takeaway? What would you want someone learning about this study to walk away with?
I think what it suggests is that the preliminary results of this show promise for a type of scalable tool that could be trained to replicate consumer sentiment related to the valence, arousal, and urge related to specific images regarding their primary method of consumption. That is my scientific answer.
Yeah, it was. That is not an Instagram caption. That is
There's
not
promise.
helpful.
There's promise that
Segue.
Yeah, AI. There's promise. Oh, another tweet about AI and
That's
promise.
basically what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And Erik said they're coming for our jobs.
I, am I the only one listening to these folks saying they're going to replace people's jobs? And I don't know. All
I
right.
think you just
Yeah,
listen to a different
don't.
set of podcasts
That's.
than Mackenzie and I do.
I can't. Yeah.
All right. Hey, RCTs, random control trials.
Yeah.
How exciting.
What is that?
What is that?
Randomized control trials.
I mean, that kind of is my first question. Obviously, with your research background, much like we just talked about AI, there's a tie in there, and Shawn and I can help bring it back to cannabis and how it can benefit it. But like, as far as what RCTs are, how are they? I mean, how are they applied in the work that you're doing, Mackenzie? And help us bring it back to cannabis regulation, cannabis policy, these state-run programs. So I'll just kind of open up the floor because this is one of those ones where I'm just going to sit back and listen for a little bit.
Okay. Randomized control trials, that's a research design that is kind of the gold standard for assessing causality, right? Causal inference, that's extremely challenging to prove. Even folks who spend their lives really dedicated to studies related to causal inference will very, very cautiously and very rarely ever say this X caused Y. RCTs are kind of the gold standard in assessing that. That's why you usually only hear about them from a clinical standpoint. You'll hear about them with drug trials, placebo trials. You'll hear about them, like there's hundreds of them happening right now with cannabis, where basically people are randomized into different groups. You could have multiple treatment groups where everyone's getting a different type of drug or different dosage of the same drug, and then you have a control group. And so the idea is you sort of look at how all of these treatments turn out. And it helps establish efficacy. In addition to causality, it's like a great way to evaluate how efficacious a drug is in particular. So I think that when we think about them with cannabis, we typically think about them as it relates to um, like we just said, pharmaceuticals or like a clinical context, but RCTs are happening in the cannabis space well outside of the clinical context. And that's so exciting and so cool. And we do them quite often. We actually find ourselves more in the experimental realm than the observational realm that we're used to, right? Like we issue the national survey, we issue surveys on behalf of states, all that cross-sectional data, meaning all that like single point in time data is just observational, meaning there's no way to establish any inference outside of like looking at different demographics and subgroups and like looking at the inferences between them. But we can't say like, oh, pre-post legalization with this different group of people during these time sets, like that would be really challenging because it's just observational data. It's not longitudinal and it's not experimental. So RCTs though that we've been conducting, and I got to give my boy Gideon a shout out, our PI, our director of research, who has been really spearheading this. He just did one for Hawaii, where he assigned folks to random taxation treatment groups. And he basically evaluated the probability of their purchase based on the tax rate applied to an average gram of cannabis. So effective tax rate, we applied the 15%, 10%, et cetera, to identify the likelihood of participating in the regulated market at that price point versus a different price point. And so everybody got randomized into these taxation treatment groups. And I think I posted on LinkedIn the sort of effect that was shown there, where you can see the trade-off between getting revenue for the agency and the probability of purchase. And so you can see how tax causes people to move into move their purchasing behaviors into different market segments.
So, and would I be correct in saying like the observational work or the observational studies can tell you what a behavior is, but these RCTs can tell you why those behaviors are happening? Is that like the step further, or am I?
Yeah, it could tell you why, it could tell you how. And I think the how is the more important angle, is like how, like at what point, for example, at what taxation point did behavior change
Gotcha.
enough to push people into a different market segment. And so you can, and I can send this study out as online as well for the little viewer notes, but you can see the perfect curve of like, okay, this is where the trade-off happens. And that's the benefit of an RCT. You get to see that behavior.
So this sounds like work that Is this the first time that you've been doing it, and why? Because it seems like it can be tied into a lot of the work that you've been doing for states for a long time with the predictive modeling. Like,
Right.
basically, if you do X, Y, or Z, here are the outcomes, pick which route you wanna go, giving them
Yeah.
all of the information or the best information to make a decision. What is the different is there a difference between the work that you've traditionally done with cannabis public policy consulting and this RCT stuff, that Gideon's doing with the taxations? What's
RCT. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
keep getting
No,
it I wanna say RTC, but it's
I could see
RCT.
Eric's
It's
wheels
like
being like, "Don't
yeah,
screw up, don't screw up,
yeah,
don't
it's
screw
yeah.
up."
wrong.
I'm gonna start saying the whole thing every time. Random control trials.
Close. Randomized control trials.
Jeez.
That's
I'm
what
It's
lo
I'm
all the
the show
same.
notes.
I'm
It's really
losing
all
all
the
my
same.
momentum from early
Yeah,
on,
you're
yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
quick
you
fade.
totally lost it, dude. Um, no, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So, like, there's so many different ways
We're
that you
back.
can assess. There's so many different ways you can assess a research outcome. Like, if you want to know what the market looks like under taxation of different schemes, like you could do different types of statistics and use different types of sales data from other states and come up with different fun statistics that are well beyond my capacity and need, getting a mimosa to handle. But the way that the RCT does, I mean, what that gives you is like the ability to truly model out behavior. And so it's doing it directly with participants. So it's like same, but different. There are so many different ways you can get at this, but an RCT is like the gold standard. There are very little assumptions that we have to build into this. Whereas if you're using other data, if you're using other observational, information like sales data, you have to have assumptions, right? Even like things like seasonality would matter quite largely. Like in any of our models, you'll see a little note at the bottom that says like, we use this data, but we know that COVID happened during this data. And so therefore, and the other thing you have to think about is like when you use other types of data that aren't experimental, you have to have the assumption that everything else stays the same, which rarely ever happens.
Exactly.
And in the experiment, it is controlled. So you do have that element of like everything quite literally is staying the same. But it is something that, you have the advantage of. Experimental usually trumps like really everything. But I know that there's like a lot of disciplines who probably would like to argue about that, but don't argue with me.
They're not on this podcast, so
Matt and Eric's like, actually.
yeah, right. Now with the big reveal again. There are other examples, because I think like the tax model is a really great one that states moving forward can take advantage of, and states in the past, I think, probably wish they would have, because every state, I think, at some point in its maturation takes a look at tax rate to know how are we competitive against an illicit market, how are we competitive against neighboring states. And that's always, there's a level setting that's happening. And you're also seeing some states come out with a tax and then quickly walk it back.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like Michigan with a 24% wholesale tax, exactly. California, like right down to the wire as far as updating their tax rate. But those examples, that's a great example, especially for legislators, policymakers, and regulators to an extent. Are there other examples where that, like it maybe in cannabis or just public policy generally, like where does that also scale to, or like, what other policy questions do you think we could tackle with a model like that, either getting ahead of, or man, I wish we did?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and it like goes directly into
Hear that,
the
Eric?
yeah. Shawn's now on my side. We're on the same team here. It goes directly into the study that I really wanted to talk about, which is the RCT for public policy done by the Swiss government. And so, are you guys familiar with what's happening in Switzerland and sort of their pilot programs?
Generally pretty neutral on everything, aren't they? You know,
It's actually like they're so neutral. They're like, we're gonna dip our toe into legalizing, but first we're gonna do a bunch of pilot studies to make sure that it
so
doesn't
as not
have
to
really bad
offend.
outcomes.
Yeah.
As like literally perfect. So they as part of their legislation, which I believe they're looking to set up the market sometime this year, but I think it was in 2021 they put together this legislation that said, listen, for the next few years we're going to put together this pilot program, and here's what constitutes a legal access, right? Like this like pharmaceutical grade type of accessibility to cannabis, and only so many people are allowed, and we're going to do a bunch of RCTs for purposes of understanding if having legal access would primarily increase cannabis use disorder. That was like their first big question with this RCT. They evaluated a bunch of secondary outcomes as well. including if substance use from other drugs is sort of captured within the regulated market, or if the illicit group is, like what that looks like. But their primary question was, okay, if we were to take two groups of people, we're gonna take a sample, and we're gonna randomize them into two groups. I think it was like 186 across both groups, and the first group got the treatment, and they were um, basically permitted to access cannabis through this regulated market in Switzerland. The second group was called the waitlist group, and they were to continue purchasing through illicit channels as they were. Now, obviously, the Swiss government did not help them procure anything, but they helped the regulated market group. There was access to pharmacists and to talk about dosing and have better education. And so that was their legal access group. And then they had their second arm was their illicit continue as usual. And they basically did a beautiful RCT, but also a, a 2-year observational follow-up. So they basically followed these groups for 6 months, pre and post. And they said, okay, what are the differences between these groups? And what are the differences between within subjects and between subjects? And what they found was that there's basically quite a bit of promise. Again, I have to speak like a scientist, promise to suggest that legal access to cannabis may not just not increase cannabis use disorder or the severity of it, but actually might lower it. And so that's a really promising finding before setting up a market to say, if our primary goal of setting up this regulated market is to, I don't know, have healthier, safer consumption, then let's test it first. And that's exactly what they did. So that was at the 6-month follow-up. Now they're spending this was in 2023, that paper came out. They spend the next 2 years doing every 2 months, I believe, follow-up of observational data of just both groups, because now their treatment has ended. They basically took those on the wait list condition and put them on the actual, you can buy from the regulated market now. And now they're watching all of their behaviors sort of across the 2 years period. It's a beautiful study design.
I would say if RCTs are the gold standard and they can answer one of the more fundamental questions, is legalization in general in these states successful based off of the criteria, which I've always boiled down to, and the three of us have talked about this, are you seeing minimal impact on cannabis use disorder, driving while under the influence, minors smoking early? So if they can say, based off of our findings, there might even be a positive
Right.
impact on these things, that's pretty persuasive for those states, countries that haven't made this move yet, to be if you want better health outcomes. I mean, there are a
Totally.
lot of other variables and a lot of other priorities, but I mean, that could be really strong for a lot of these conversations that are happening.
To that end, is there, because I'm thinking about it in the much bigger, almost political picture now, where, and Erik, you kind of opened this door for me, which is legalization brings with it a lot of promises, some that the regulators or even that legislators don't make, right? This is a miracle drug. This is no one ever said that. Or this is going to make billions. And it's nope, no one ever. So my fear is that as a result, now you see these repeal efforts where it's the promises of legalization have not been met. It's well, who made what promises and by when? But I'm thinking about two elements here. The legalization effort often comes with a sense of urgency to it, where Switzerland, bless their hearts, we don't have 2 years to wait to set up. So I guess a question for you is, can we take that study now and use it to anticipate? Can I take that study and say, I'm Massachusetts, I'm going to legalize. Can I apply it? I realize it's not a one-to-one apples to apples, but we can draw some sort of information from that study that is now globally available. And then if you were to legalize, though, this is probably the question you're going to be most excited to answer, I would imagine, is if I were a policymaker saying to you, Mackenzie, I'm going to start this program from scratch, what should I put in place to monitor, to see, to almost prove that I have met whatever promises I'm going to make? What should policymakers think about building in on the front end of their efforts that either lays the groundwork for evaluating, knowing that urgency is not going to allow, it's not going to give us 2 years. I can't wait 2 years to see that there's any sort of validity to that. A lot of questions sort of rolled up in that, and I apologize. But you can see my wheels are starting to turn a little bit as far as how can I use it? What can I learn from it? How can I apply it? And then most importantly, how do I make better policy at the end of the day? If I were starting today, I guess I'll land with that question finally. Like if I were starting today, what should I put in there to think about evaluating going forward?
Gosh, it's much more difficult for a state to take those findings and say, like, oh, okay, the findings hold. We'll be able to have the exact same findings. Obviously, a state's going to have a lot more implications and a lot less in the control than an entire
Exactly.
country. Like another country in Europe would be far more suited to be like, oh, okay, Switzerland found this. It's probably the same for us. Like, I mean, obviously dependent on their culture, but like I would say
Mhm.
France, for example, France and Switzerland are probably, of similar nature
What's that supposed to
demographically.
mean?
I think they speak the same language. I think that matters. But I mean, like, I think that would probably be like a good parallel to be like, if that these populations are quite similar. It's going to be harder for a state other than a country. It's going to be harder for a country that doesn't, or, that doesn't have the same language, demographics, culture, etc. But that being said, if you're a state legislature and you're like, I'm putting together cannabis legislation and I don't have 2 years, but I definitely want to see the effects. And I want to do what we can to get all this information quickly to be able to know if some of these policies work and some of these policies don't and what to change. My immediate reaction is start data collection today. Because right now you have like policy making is largely what's referred to as like a natural experiment. Once you introduce the policy, everybody's received the intervention. And so what you think about it is like if you have that pre data, now it's not controlled, it's not an RCT, it's not experimental, but it is sort of a natural experiment. And this is largely what the field of public policy works in. Like the research element of public policy is looking at different treatments, different policy treatments and exposure across states. So collect data today so that you'll be able to know. And then also obviously assign as much funding as possible to be able to do experiments throughout the years.
So that's a segue too, is like, that sounds like it's not free. Like, what
No.
is like a cost? Not that I'm looking for a price tag, like precisely, but something in the scale of like that Switzerland project, like
Oh yeah.
for the duration plus the population set, like
Mhm.
all the supports they put around those controls, like that's not a casual exercise by any means,
Yeah,
right?
and this is getting into the question that I was gonna have as well. Are these randomized control trials sorry, are they accessible? Are they feasible for states? Like, I know
Totally.
Massachusetts down to the CCC, don't you guys have a research division? Like,
Yeah.
if they cooked up
They
this if they
yes.
if they cooked up an idea, like, is this feasible for them? Can they do this? Or to Sean's point, are the costs and the time frames just so astronomical, it doesn't make sense?
No, of course you can. And just quick shout out to
Just
Julie
use
Johnson because
AI.
just you.
Well, I've had that thought like 6
Well,
times already. Yeah, yeah,
so
totally.
actually, there's much to say about this. Okay, so first, I just want to shout out Julie Johnson in Massachusetts for having that a great research center, the best research center, arguably in cannabis. Massachusetts has done a great job at that. And yes, RCTs they can be expensive. Like what the Swiss government did, I'm certain had to be a pretty penny, and I'm certain that they had the creme de la creme of researchers and had 6 years of funding to do something like that.
Is that a French, is that a
The creme
French
de la
reference?
creme.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
wasn't, but we can pretend that I was that strategic. Um, but you take a look at Hawaii, right? Like they hired us to do an RCT within our survey. We were already going to collect observational data for them. We were already going to do the cross-sectional analysis. And so we embedded into our survey, which is non-probability based sample. So it's convenient. So it's cheaper. And then we used post-iterative stratifying, also referred to as raking, to make it representative. And so
Yeah.
you
Just a
can do this.
post-iterative bit. That's all.
Yeah, you got it. That's right.
Yeah.
You can do this in a way that is actually cheap and cost effective and a part of your observational data collection, which most states are actually doing You just need to have somebody who really knows how to run experiments sort of set it up for you, because the back end and the administration is the most time consuming part. But it's totally accessible. I mean, like I said, Hawaii, that RCT was a part of a larger survey where we collected demographic data, we collected consumption behaviors. We were able to look at groups based on, what type of were they already procuring most of their cannabis from a regulated source? Were they already sort of embedded in the illicit market to a certain degree? So, and that's also including medical patients. You can look at that stuff here. So there are ways to do this in a way that's accessible and cheap. We also did another, I mean, we've been running for them for a while. We did another one related to packaging and labeling questions about seeing how that increased or decreased trust within the package. That's another question that a state had. We were able to do that, and so you're able to pick and choose your sort of your question of interest. I mean, that research is so cool. Anybody can do it, really. You can do it cheap. It's not super super cheap, but you can do it. It's accessible. I promise.
So my question, and I can't remember, I think it was Shawn that said it maybe tongue in cheek about just have AI do it. Going back to the first conversation, that study, or the research that, what was his name, Jacob was doing,
Take it.
Her
uh,
buddy, yeah, her
My,
buddy.
my, my dear friend.
the the one that was trying to duplicate via the large language models, was that a randomized control trial study?
No,
No.
yeah, there's no
That's a
treatment
stupid
groups. Yeah.
question, I
No,
Yeah.
reckon.
it's not. It's not. It's
I mean,
an experiment of sorts, but it's not an RCT.
Okay, so because that was going to be my point, is like, just let's talk about more people that are losing their jobs to AI. Researchers gone.
yeah,
Well,
it's
well,
a post-iterative impact is what they call it, Eric. I look, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, research it brings out a lot of curiosity in policy, and I think it brings out a lot of potential in what a policy could be. And uh, but I think to what we've learned a little bit in our discussion today is that it can both front end, back end, like you can integrate research. Like it's never too late to start, except for obviously the monitoring programs, so the follow on stuff you want to do. But if there's a policy that states or policymakers in particular are struggling with, like it doesn't require you like to isolate and not ask questions. And I think as we started out, the implication early on was like there is no such thing as like a dumb question. And I think research kind of allows us to work through that, where it's like the question is a curiosity. I don't know what to do. Like the tax rate question is, what is the sweet spot? I know there is one, but then I find myself talking to people like you and to people like Dr. Johnson in Massachusetts, where it's like, I know there's an answer here. And then that gets your wheels turning about, we could totally set up a study and like ask people those questions. Um, I guess, is that where a lot of you work with CPPC and the work in your career? How does sort of research come your way, right? Like is it a brainstorm? Is it the folks find you and say, can you do this? Or are you brainstorming these things and bringing them to states? Like, how does that interaction work where you're actually building out? I mean, some of the stuff, like you said, it's 2 years, it's 3 years. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 years, but I'm going to set up this infrastructure now to research this topic over time. And just curious about how sort of like
yeah.
your process internally.
It's a great question. So most of the time, the work that comes to CPPC are questions that are like legislatively mandated to look into. And some of them are like the taxation stuff. Others are more around like predictive modeling and having a better understanding of where the market's going to be in a few years to help businesses make better decisions around what they want to do with their license and their supply, et cetera. And so that's like the bulk of our work is those studies that are to be done legislatively or to be done at basic. We want to pass laws that are data informed, and so we're gonna make sure we get this question looked at. In other instances, we'll be talking about something that's unique to a state and being like, "Oh my God, that needs to be researched. That could change the game." And then we like have calls and try to like get interest within whatever state's really, really interesting, right? Like Hawaii is going to be such an interesting market when it gets set up, because it is an island, and it's an island of predominantly Asian cultures, which have much less consumption than that of other cultures. And so what that market shapes up to look like will be maybe it is a mostly tourism market. Like we really, it's going to be fascinating. And so that was a question, was what will tourism look like? And we worked with the team in Hawaii, who were absolutely amazing research partners. By the grace of God, somehow the director who was working with us on the report is one of like the world leading statisticians for predictive modeling. Her name is Lynn. She did the predictive modeling for COVID for Asia, like I guess countries within Asia during for the World Health Organization. So she really we were so lucky to have her pedigree on with us. She really totally understood much of what we were trying to do. And so when we looked at tourism, we were like, well, there's conversations around, will this deter tourism because they have so much tourism from other Asian countries like Japan, or will it increase tourism? And so we said, well, what's a good comparator, right? There's nothing like Hawaii and within the United States. So we looked at Guam and we pulled all the tourism data from Guam pre and post legalization of adult use. Now their market's very different, but we looked at that. I think Gideon did an ARIMA model for that. And to say, okay, you can say now with this that legalization did not cause a decrease in tourism for Guam, the island of Guam. So it's a mixed bag, but really, like, researchers are our number one thing is just like sitting around and talking about things that would be interesting to know, and then we kind of hope that people agree with us and don't think that we're just like really nerdy and weird, and will just let us do numbers for them.
Do you think, and sorry, Erik, if I'm cutting it off, just on that last point though, because it's a tension that I've always held, like just personally, which is as a policymaker, as a regulator, like Erik and I used to hold like, look, I'm doing it. I'm in the thick of it. I've got to make 1,000 decisions a day. And then I get this research paper slapped on my desk that's like, well, the research says you should be doing it differently. And in that moment, I'm like, I don't care what the research says, or like, oh, that study, I'm going to like dismiss it. Because one of the things that this tension is, like you said, this sitting around sort of thinking about things and framing up what could be, what should be. And meanwhile, though, like the day-to-day grind of regulating does not permit that like exercise at all. And I don't know, Erik, if I'm speaking on behalf of you in any way, but I just think there's an actual tension there that's really fascinating to me, because you're both right. Like, we should be thinking big picture. We should be thinking strategically. We should be thinking about implications. But then the truth is, like, my desk doesn't allow it. My calendar does not allow it.
I'll jump in real quick. Yeah, I never found any tension. I mean, Mackenzie, who was your first day client that you did this type of work for? Like, I remember
your rollout took how long?
Well, you can blame our legislature. Yeah, exactly.
I think I blame your old governor too.
Yeah, he has some blame. Definitely his fair share. But no, I remember when Mackenzie first pitched me this idea. She's like, if we could do this for you, would you want to know X, Y, and Z? I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I would. And also, can you answer these 15 other questions? Because I need to make sure that they're defensible when I make them. And I remember we made a lot of decisions, policy decisions, rule updates, agency initiatives based off of some of that work that CPPC was doing. And I thank God for that work every day. It made the decision-making process easier and more defensible. And I made time for
this episode is
I made time for I made time for research and science, Shawn.
And I made a department for it.
Yeah, and the premier department. So good kudos to both of you, because like you're in that sense you are rare regulators. Like, that's not every regulator you meet, and I don't mean that in cannabis. I mean that like ad nauseum. Like, but you're right, Shawn. I think like that whenever I hear Erik say, "Oh, AI is going to replace researchers," like, really? Because my thing is, you can drop research on someone's desk. You can, which is like the biggest gripe with academia in America. They're just sitting on this ivory tower and they drop something on your desk and say, thanks for paying us $1 million to do this work. It was really fun and important. Best of luck. But that's not the ethos of research, especially applied research. And so we're going to do all this work for you. And Erik, I think the best actually example that we have is with Maine. We're going to do all this research and your calendar won't permit it. Your legislature hates it. Like, all the politics of it is not going to work out. Well, that's sort of the other angle of implementation science is, okay, how do we actually implement this? And so with Maine, help me remember, Erik, because I think what happened was we found that the localities that did not have had not opted in at this point had higher rates of not only illicit cannabis use, obviously, but had higher rates of or higher severity of CUD or something like that.
Of those negative health outcomes that we
Yeah.
were saying. Yes, because Maine was an opt-in state, so we had, I mean, I think it was 2 years in, I think we had less than 10% of our cities and towns that had opted in, and we found that in the research that we did, they were better health outcomes from those individuals that are accessing cannabis from regulated sources in those towns. And so while we found that, and obviously we shared it, and we're like, this is kind of an important
Then
finding here, and there are things that we can do to start like addressing it while not kind of breaking out of that local control opt-in nature of the program, because that would have started a huge fight. We put together a roadshow where we drove around the state of Maine, meeting with local elected officials who were the gatekeepers of this, and not advocating for them to opt in, but giving them the information that would help inform their decisions. And I think we did that for a year, and we got a certain level of success, or identified challenges or barriers that they're having to opt in, and addressed them. It was, yeah,
we addressed them.
adjusted
Not
them.
editing that
But
out. Nope. That's
But
staying in.
it actually went a step further, because then it was the politics involved, like them being like, "That's great, thanks for the data. We still like don't like putting my implementation lens or science lens on. It's really like you could tell us it all you want. We don't have money for this." And then you went back to the legislature and you said, "This is a public health and safety issue. Look at the public health data. Can we take from that fund, the public health and safety fund, and make a drawdown for the localities who want to opt in?" And
Right.
so, like that line of thinking of like, yeah, drop it on my desk. That's great. I wish I had the time, money, and people. Like that is a very real issue. And so CPPC's part of like whole role in this is we're going to help you get there by trying to figure out, how we get X to Y and how to make this feasible, because doing research that's not going to, with findings that won't be implemented, is like, that's soul sucking. I don't understand why people would ever want to do that.
Especially
But
given the time devotion to that research. Like if you just
oh yeah.
spent 5
And
years
money.
building
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing is, but I think like the selfish, like personal investment, if like I'm the lead researcher, yeah, like I had this team, I had all this data, like you put all this effort in and then
Yeah.
it's filed
Yeah.
and like maybe
Horrible.
cited someday as like what they should have done. But to your point, I think it also this speaks to what CPPC does is that last mile of work of as far as like getting it to the regulator, but with the right level of this solves your problem today. There is a possibility. And I think the one point that I want to emphasize that you made is like, but we see your reality for what it is as well. Like you said, that line through of like, the research is there, you agree with it, you don't have the time or the money for it. Well, here's the line to the money. I think that exercise is what really marries research and policy very, very well to an actual like action. What actually comes from this? And as a researcher, I would hope that that's the most rewarding aspect is I
Oh my
changed
God.
something or I tightened something or like I found a hole and filled it or I made better policy at the end of the day. And I think between research and regulators, there's no doubt that good policy should be the main objective. That's why we're here.
100%. It's perfect. Beautiful.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, that felt good too. All right, so next time we have some other guests. What's next
Let's
there, Erik?
Yeah,
What's on
I'll
your
say
AI show agenda?
we're about to hit an hour mark, but I want to make sure that we do save time for the third topic, so we can transition right now over to hemp. And I know you have well, I shouldn't say I know, but I'm certain, or I hope you have data from your national surveys around hemp. Like, I guess the big question is what's going to happen when we hit this November deadline, where in theory it all goes away, because there has to be a significant market for it, and they just don't go away overnight. Um,
Yeah.
are they going to stay now in this illicit hemp market? Are they actually going to go to the regulated marijuana and cannabis markets? I mean, that's part of the friction between the hemp and marijuana folks, right? Like you're stealing
Mm.
our folks. Like, what is going to happen? Like, what are some of the scenarios that could unfold, and what is the research that you've been doing leading you to
Yeah.
believe here?
Yeah. This is exciting because like this is one where we're all researchers in this room, right? We're hypothesizing about what we think and then we can test it. And because we have in some states, we don't have it nationally, but we have in some states demand data for hemp. We'd be able to test this post November 2026 and tell you empirically what happened to it, which is the coolest thing ever. But the
Coolest thing ever.
it's
Yeah,
the
I
coolest thing ever. No,
got a
like
chuckle
that's
out
so
of me.
cool. You can't even deny that. That's so cool. Um, the what we found consistently is that hemp demand is roughly between 9 to 13% of all cannabis spending from past month cannabis consumers. Now, that's not that much, but it's not inconsequential. And so when you think of it like, so Gideon actually, he ran another study only once though, for one state, and it was a medical state. So can't say that it holds for all, and it's a very unique medical state, I should say. Anyway, he ran some
Feels like a
fun
riddle.
statistics.
So that feels like a riddle. It's a hemp
You'll figure it
demand
out if you
study in a
become
medical state.
novel, unique.
Yeah.
They basically he did some fun statistics to look at the those who were consuming from hemp markets and those who were consuming from the regulated cannabis market. And basically, what he found was that cannabis is not hemp, an alternative derived whatever cannabinoids, just anything outside of regular cannabis THC9. Was found to be a soft complement and not a substitute. So basically saying these aren't really taking away from your cannabis sales. If anything, they might kind of be complementary to them. Again, only one did it once and did it for a state that's a little bit unique. So can't say that that's true throughout, but let's just assume that finding holds. And that is the case for hemp, that it's a complement when there is a form of legal access. When there is no form of legal access, and right now I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, that's why I have like a nice background.
Yeah, we're going to
You
talk
don't
about
have
those books here. We're going to talk about
yeah,
the Betty Crocker books in a
you
sec.
don't have to see my trash New York apartment, my jail cell. But the point of that is like down here, that's the only market is this hemp market, and you can get it anywhere. Now, coming down here from North Carolina, it is it's the craziest thing you've ever seen. There are cannabis stores everywhere. It's a huge market. And so when that access is taken away as your own, when there's no other form of cannabis, what happens? So I think there's like a few different hypotheses, like what happens where there is regulated access, what happens when there is medical regulated access, and what happens when there is no access. And I have some theories, but I'd love to hear from you all what you think.
Well, if it's not in direct competition, if it's a soft complement, maybe those folks just start drinking beer again. I would say, haven't we been seeing like those liquor and beer sales plummeting year over year? Am I like out in outer
Yeah,
space here?
that's right.
Yeah, there
That's
you
right.
go.
Alcohol
The-
consumption's
you can
down.
see
You're Maine.
Budweiser, Miller Lite, Coors
You're
Light. The big beer is behind this. Big beer is
big
behind
beer.
this.
I highly doubt. So actually, I also forgot to say that our friends at Verisight, which is a firm that does sampling, so they do probability-based samples. They get you representative samples. They have their annual. I'm going to say this word so wrong, just like Jacob's last name. Omnibus. Is that right? Omnibus.
Omnibus.
Yeah.
Omnibus.
It's better than Jacob's last name. Yeah.
survey.
Nailed
It
it.
is better than Jacob's last name.
Much better.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jacob. I'm so sorry. They're
Wherever
an
you are,
incredible
whoever you
firm,
are.
Verisight. They are doing their omnibus survey. They let us add a question for free just to have on their survey. And so I asked the question of,
Free
for
question on a
everyone in
survey.
the United States, I said hemp is going to be illegal. And if you don't have access, and I came up with a few questions and worked with Gideon on it to get to the point of like, here's what hemp products are if you live in a state with this jurisdiction, whatever. And one of the response options was, what do you think your behavior will be like? What do you think you'll change? And one of the response options was, I'll switch to a different substance, i.e. alcohol, tobacco, etc. And when I was typing that out, I thought that would be a fascinating finding. I don't think that that's what's going to happen at all, but it's possible. But I have a hard time believing that that'll be frequently endorsed.
Hey, it was an answer you put on the survey.
But yeah, you know what? You're right.
Yep.
You're
But
right.
I think that's right. I also think people are sometimes, when being surveyed especially, are like, there's an element of that's like, the right answer is. versus
Mm.
the honest answer. Like it's like test tasting. Like this one feels right, but the truth is I'm going to source it from the illicit market. It's like I'm going to admit to acquiring a Schedule 1 drug,
Yeah.
and I'm going to hit send on that answer that was
No,
sent to
it's-
my email address. Like it's surveillance data.
Right. No, totally. Though you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked by how honest people are. And I think
No, I
that
read the
is,
comment section on stuff too. So yeah, I definitely
yeah.
get that people are not shy.
yeah.
But right. Oof, God, yeah, the internet's really done it. Um, but yeah, you're totally right, especially because we're asking about perceived future behavior, which like so we're not doing an experiment. We're just like, what do you think you'll do? So like
Yeah.
alone
Do you
that
think
makes
you'll
the
break the
question
law down
have
the road? Oh yeah,
right.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
for
Now
sure.
it's a conspiracy.
Definitely.
We're both in on it. But
Yeah.
so my suspicion, my hypothesis would be that people are still going to acquire that product, but they will do it from the gray or illicit market. And my fear, though, from a policy standpoint, is, and I should admit some bias here as far as like I have clients in this space, so I like listeners should know there's a disclosure here, which is I do think that the good operator is going to comply with the law, and the good operator was the one creating a hemp product that was sourced and tested and manufactured and labeled in a proper way, in a way that actually respects it as a consumer product. And the illicit market doesn't have that. Let's say it doesn't have the requirement. Therefore, I don't have the expectation, like, because compliance is expensive too. To do it compliantly takes a good amount of investment of time and logistics, etc. But to make a product and just sell it through an illicit market, like it doesn't require that same level of care. And that's what's still going to be available after November. The good stuff, I think, and when I say good stuff, I mean like compliant operator that's asking for rules, that operator is going to comply and shut down operations most likely.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if we were voting now, that's probably the one that I would go. I mean, like this November date comes, it's just not all going to go away. Like we know that's going to be the case. It's still going to be there. So they're not going to necessarily have to change their behaviors to get their hands on it. But over time, I could see some of those other options helpful. What were some of the other hypotheses or some of the other answers to the question that you put in the survey? Like what are some of the other
Yeah,
I'll
what else can I
continue.
do?
Yeah, I'll continue sourcing them through illicit sources.
Yep.
I don't think I used the term illicit, but whatever it was. Um, through I think like unofficial sources was something I said or something like that. The other ones were
Stock up,
start smoking more weed?
yeah, right. Transition to
hoard.
regular cannabis. And then one of them was I will source this from regulated sources, even if that requires me to travel. Like if my jurisdiction doesn't allow it, I will source it.
And then
That was an
illegally
option.
transport it into my state.
Yeah, I will make sure it is in bulk in my car.
I will source it legally, transport it illegally.
Yeah, well, that's someone else's problem. But
Sure.
the
Highway patrol.
Highway patrol, right? But yeah, those are kind of like the main hypotheses. I think we had a few more in there just sprinkled in. I can't remember what they are, but those are like the main thoughts. Is like you're either going to continue using from gray sources, or you're going to stop using outright, or you're going to source it. You're going to be like, actually, I still really, really want this, and I don't have like an illicit source for it, so I'm just going to get it from my neighboring state or whatever.
When are you going to have the results or the findings?
From the omnibus survey, we'll probably have them in like a few months. I think they went out for data
November.
collection recently. Yeah.
Have them
So
by
and
November.
but those will be
No,
public.
end of
Anyone can have
November.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, anybody will have them. Verisite's really great about they have a back end to their website where you can look at the crosstabs so you can see the demographic and the age breakdown across each response. So I'll send that out when that happens. Shout out Verisite. But the hemp demand stuff, like we're hoping that some state will be like, we need to know what happened. I'm like, great, let's do the follow up in December 2026. Like let's get these answers. It'd be so cool to know.
Where are they going? What's happening?
Yeah, and, like, imagine you do see an uptick in beverage and, like, that would be crazy. I mean, you wouldn't find out right away. I mean,
We'd
the
have you
ultimate
we'd have you back as a guest on the podcast just to talk
yeah,
about that.
please, in November 2026. But, the best way to do this is, like, have the data collection once again, right before it happens to, like, really get a consistent behavior of, like, what is current and, like, ask about stocking up, questions like that, and then get to the crux of the issue after it's gone. I mean, I'll be the state of North Carolina, state of South Carolina, the proliferation of these cannabis shops that are just everywhere. I cannot fathom what that industry looks like in terms of dollars to just be decimated overnight. But
That's why my assumption is they're just gonna kick the can down the road. Shawn, you're more tied into this conversation, I'm
Mhm.
sure, but I would have to imagine that the action that they do take will be limited. It'll be like, you know what? November 27 or 28 seems more reasonable, and that gives them time to address. I mean, to your point, it just seems like such a large market, such a large industry, just to be like
in the South.
gone. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking just from like a policymaker lens, the problem is it's such a large market, and a large segment of that market that I'm concerned about will also continue to exist if I kick that can down the road, so to speak. So
Right.
like those gas station gummies that I took a victory lap on saying, no, we closed that. If I kick the can down the road on closing that, I've allowed those now affirmatively. So I would hope that the maneuver actually, frankly, is a framework, that is a low dose um, product available to states like South Carolina and elsewhere that don't have access. But the fear I have when I say access is typically the sympathetic audience for that is a patient. I want medical access,
Yeah.
and allowing broader access to a state that has not allowed it feels like that sort of offends a states' rights element of. So I'm not looking to. I'm sort of opening a rabbit hole I don't know that I want to go down, but I just think that if I'm sitting in like a member of Congress, if I'm sitting in their shoes, I was told I took a vote to close the gas station weed loophole. Why are you asking me to not do that now? Like, so I think there needs to be both a reckoning of those businesses that don't support that gas station sort of unknown origin product, and like those standards I think need to start boxing some folks out, and setting that standard I think would be the responsible thing to do, because states that also have programs are counting on tax revenue based on that too. So like there's a
yeah,
lot of implications there that
yeah.
you're heading into midterms, and it's
I
a
was going to
whole.
say, I certainly wasn't saying that it was the responsible thing to do. It certainly seems like the most realistic. That seems like a more complex.
It's the
Uh,
simplest thing to do for sure.
yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but hemp, yeah, it's definitely
The gift that keeps on giving.
sure.
Unless you're hemp, unless you're in the hemp
Yeah,
industry.
Yeah.
actually has an expiration date. So
Yeah.
That keeps on giving until November.
yeah,
All
and then
right.
it's done. It's gifted. It's over.
So hour and 15, this was a great conversation around stuff that we haven't really delved into before, obviously, with the research we've talked a little bit about. Certainly have never injected the AI conversation into this stuff. We've talked plenty about hemp, and we'll have to have you back once we figure out what happens and you have some of those results back from the omnibus survey. But I wanted to save time for our last segment, trivia. Uh,
Mhm.
I did prepare a question, and after I prepared it, Shawn, I had the thought that I I might have already used this question, but in just like in
Watch, I'll
typical
get it
Eric
wrong again.
typical Eric form, we'll move forward with the question that we do have. But I wanted to make sure we tied it into part of our conversation, which I tried to tie it into the RCT conversation.
What does
So
RCT stand for?
randomized, randomized. So Mackenzie, you can team up with Shawn and give an answer to this question. It's a two-parter. Um, oh God, where did it go?
It's part two. I need part one. I only have the answer, not the question.
I don't know what I did with it. And I have
You
to
don't
make sure that
remember
I
it?
get I need to no, I do remember the question, but there's details in it that I need to make sure that I hit specifically. Here we go. All right, I got it pulled up. What was the first FDA approved drug containing a purified extract from the cannabis plant, and in what year was it approved?
Jesus, say that again?
All right, I'll slow it down. What was the first FDA-approved drug containing a purified extract from the cannabis plant? In what year was it approved? See, I assumed you would get the first part, but the year would have been tough.
Well, the only FDA approved one that I know of, meaning my knowledge is extremely limited. Shawn, maybe you know, I was going to say Epidiolex.
Correct.
Year, I think it probably goes back much longer than the conversations we've been having around it. So maybe like the early 2000s.
Shawn?
Well, he didn't like budge. I was waiting for like a
Yeah, I
wink
was
or
like,
like
give a
like
towel.
ugh, she's way off.
No, yeah, that one wasn't as, she got the first part, so there's no hate going the way, but it was definitely later than the early 2000s.
Mm.
But that's helpful. Yeah.
I want you to, you know what? I want you to
There's
give
like
me
a
a
secret
date.
to it. Can I be like within 2 years?
Sure.
I'm gonna go 2015.
Wrong. 2018. You missed it by
No
1 year.
way.
Yeah.
Really?
Mackenzie made the point of like, we've been talking about it. And I'm like, when I started talking about it was probably 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
So Mackenzie was in my head because I was like, it's probably before then because I had to go through a whole process. So
It was, that's why I didn't think you were going to get the date, because it was later than I first thought. Because I would have probably been off by a big chunk of years as well. Probably
Yeah.
like skewing towards way earlier than that. So there you got it.
Not bad.
I mean, I have like trivia questions. I just don't like any of them. So, all right, here's one. It's mostly for Mackenzie because we know that Eric's going to be guessing. In that Swiss study, the RCT study, see how easy that was, Eric? RCT?
RCT.
Yep.
It's like,
what was the maximum THC potency allowed for products sold to participants?
Ooh.
did you literally just Google that?
I
in
had
the
told you I had a
study.
list of questions. It's in the
Yeah.
study.
It's in the study. It's one of the characteristics of the intervention group. Shit, I forget. Oh, I hope I can curse. Shoot, I forget. I'm gonna probably say 20.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to say 20. I'll say, no, I'll say 21. Oh, Price is Right.
Ooh,
No, don't do that.
$1,
Never do
Bob.
that.
I'm going to say 1%, Bob. 0.3%. It was 20.
All right.
Yeah.
Also,
So,
that's kind of easy because like flour usually doesn't exceed 20%. It's like usually hovers around 20%.
ooh, that's a whole
so,
different
like,
topic because the labs say otherwise.
well, yeah,
It's like,
much saying
Labs.
that.
Labs.
I undo my mic here. All right, Eric.
No, that was yeah.
I think I'm still up on trivia, so that's good.
I mean, we can go back and watch it. But anyway, Mackenzie, thank you for taking the time, coming on for a second time. We'll 100% have you on for a third time later this year. Shawn, good seeing you. You were particularly asshole-ish today, but it's all right.
You're welcome.
You know what?
Thanks.
It comes and goes. It's
Yeah.
Still love you. But yeah, we have more episodes coming up, some great guests we have lined up, I think, for like the next 3 weeks, which is exciting. Just kind of have some new voices and new topics of conversation that I'm certainly looking forward to. So other than that, yeah, just again, Mackenzie, thanks. Shawn, you got anything?
I don't, aside from Mackenzie. Great. Always great to see you. And please, you had a thought.
I did. I just want to say, don't forget, I'll send you the studies to put in the show notes so people can read
That's
them
right.
themselves, because I probably did a really great job of butchering them. But credit.
And there was a
where
point
credit's due.
where you referenced putting up an image or a graph or something. I will attempt to do that because we are a lean operation here at the Hybrid. But to that point, please subscribe, like, and do all the things that people do with podcasts. Thank you as always for listening. And we will be back at you soon, as Erik indicated, with exciting new guests, exciting new topics, but always your two co-hosts that are apparently one of them's an asshole today. So
Cannabis Public Policy Consulting, looking up. If you're a regulator, look them up and you need help.
Thanks for the
brought
plug.
to you by that and Squarespace. All right, everyone. Thanks as always. We will see you again soon.
Talk soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
The hybrid. hybrid. The hybrid. The hybrid.